Chapter and Fairfield County Farm Bureau boards for helping to put this together, and I also really appreciate Lancaster and York for being big sponsors of this. So really appreciate those board members. If y'all would stand up, I just want folks to recognize how many folks we do have on our boards. If you're on any of those 4 boards, if you stand up, that'd be great. I want to recognize our State House members. I know the House is still in session tonight. Randy Leggett told me to please express his disappointment not being able to be here, but we do have several state senators here. So please stand. Oh, there's Mike. But I know if all our state senators would stand and be recognized, I would appreciate it. And we do appreciate Wes Clymer here. He's actually chairman of the Senate Act Committee, so thank you. Recognize the Chester County School Board. Dr. Sutton and several school board members are here. If y'all please stand, we appreciate it. We have several of our county council members here tonight as well. If y'all please stand and be recognized, we really appreciate what you do. Dr. Frederick is also here. He's our county superintendent. Let's see. We also have many of the members of our State Conservation Board here tonight, including our State President, Tyler Brown. If y'all stand and be recognized, we appreciate it. Mr. Boone Peeler joins us tonight as well. He's the immediate past FSA director for our state. He'll stand up there. We appreciate Boone joining us. Ms. Lori Cronenberg is our current director. She was not able to be here tonight due to illness. We also had quite a few FFA members attend tonight throughout our counties here. If y'all stand and be recognized, we appreciate it. It's good to see a lot of young people here, and several weren't able to come because the school session just went back in, and they weren't able to get permission to come to their school. So we really appreciate all that were able to come here tonight. Let's see, I just wanted to also thank, while I'm here, Congressman Norman's office for putting this together. This was really great. To get a group here to talk about this, we really appreciate it. You guys are one of the best staffs in Washington. Really appreciate Joy Vaught and Hallie for putting this together in your office and working with us to coordinate everything. I also want to thank my wife, Jane, who's helped me quite a bit through this process. And that's all my thank yous. When we're over tonight, y'all are welcome to take the flowers off the tables. And I don't have a neat way of picking it out, but we're going to show the congressman that the farmers can work together to figure out who gets the flowers. So y'all are welcome to take them home. My sister-in-law, Caroline Wilson, put them together for us tonight for the flowers on our farm. So I appreciate her doing that very much. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Harry Ott, our South Carolina Farm Bureau president. He's also a farmer from Calhoun County. So
Thank you, Jeb. Welcome, everybody. Isn't it wonderful to be back together where we can shake hands and give each other a hug and get back to normal? I'm so glad y'all were able to come out. I want to thank Jeb. You know, everything that we do is about relationships. And we met with the press a little while ago, and they asked, well, why is it important for a congressman to come and talk with people? And it's because it's important for that relationship so that when we have issues on our farms, we can go to our elected officials and have a conversation and explain what's going on the farm. Not everybody, as I told the press, had the opportunity and the good fortune to grow up on a farm and be a farmer. So it falls under 1.5% of us who are farmers to be able to explain to our elected officials what we do on the farm and why it's important for them to make good, sound decisions representing us in Washington. Now, I have the fortunate privilege of introducing 2 sitting congressmen and 1 retired congressman. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a little bit about each one of them, very little bit, and then we're going to hear from each one of them individually. And then when they finish, we're going to have an opportunity to have a question and answer time. So this will be your opportunity to ask questions or make comments to make sure they understand the issues that you face back on the farm, because they might not understand. We've got a media person who has a lot of experience on the rodeo. We've got an accountant, and we've got a developer. I'm not sure we got a farmer over there. And a little brief story about Ralph. You know, Ralph and I go way back. So when I first met Ralph in the South Carolina house, I had to teach him about what agriculture was all about. And then he tried to teach me how to make sound business decisions. And he was real quick to say, I don't think farming is very good business. So, but we formed a real strong friendship. And even when we disagreed, we were able to share ideas with each other. And Ralph took that to Washington with him. And I want to tell you a little bit about how Ralph has helped us in the agricultural community. Back in 2018, when Mike Conaway was chairman of the Ag Committee in Washington, we had a little issue with a few amendments that we needed to get rid of. So the Cotton Council called us and said, can you help us with Ralph? We need to get rid of a few amendments and we need his support. So we went to work, and I don't know if I'm going to take credit or Chairman Conaway. I probably suspect Chairman Conaway gets most of the credit. But Ralph helped us get rid of those bad amendments, and he voted for that bill to come out of the House and go over to the Senate. And I can't tell you how much that meant to not only agriculture in South Carolina, but all across this great country that we call home. And without Ralph, I'm not sure what would have happened to that 2018 Farm Bill. But because Ralph understood the importance of agriculture, he was able to help us get that thing across the line. And for that, Ralph, we will always be grateful. And the good thing is, to this day, it's because of Ralph Norman that we are all here tonight. He wants to hear from us, and nothing else you can ask of a congressman is other than to give you an opportunity to make your case. So as long as we have good people that are willing to listen to our problems, I think it bodes well for agriculture and for South Carolina. Now, I mentioned former chairman of the House Ag Committee, Mr. Conaway. I got to know him, and I want to say this out in public. I got to know him because South Carolina Farm Bureau decided we wanted to have a federal PAC. And because we had a federal PAC, and Chairman Conaway was running for re-election, we had the opportunity to go and meet him in Washington. I'll never forget, it was a Tex-Mex restaurant, and it was as good a meal as I ever had. And we formed a relationship. And y'all hear me talk about relationships all the time. If you've got a relationship with somebody, you can have a conversation with them. And if you have a conversation with them, you can share what's important. And because of that, we formed a relationship. Now, he might not like me too much, because during that relationship, we had a little football team up at Clemson. And one day they happened to play Texas A&M. And he thought he wanted to go down there and watch that ball game. so we invited him, and we had a little function for him, and I took him to the ball game, and I think he was glad to get out of Death Valley after that ball game. But now I had Texas A&M to go do a little better this year, so I wish them well until they play Clemson, okay? Or Carolina, let me cover my bases. I don't know if y'all play Carolina this year or not. But Mike's from Texas, and he was a wonderful proponent and supporter of agriculture. He got the 2018 Farm Bill through Congress, and we will never forget the importance of what Mike Conaway did for agriculture. If you are a cotton grower, you need to personally tell Chairman Conaway thank you, because he got cotton back into the Farm Bill when it wasn't in there. So on behalf of every farmer, and particularly every cotton farmer, Mr. Chairman, thank you for coming to South Carolina, being with us. We also, because of this affair tonight, I've also had the opportunity to make a new friend, Representative Rick Crawford, who comes to us from Arkansas. Now, you know, before I get to know people, I kind of check up on them a little bit. So I called the president of Arkansas Farm Bureau and Mississippi Farm Bureau, and they gave him very high marks. So he comes highly recommended. I've enjoyed getting to have a conversation with him. I believe he is going to be the next real leader on the Ag Committee. He is the vice chair of the Republicans on the House Ag Committee now, I believe, Rick. So who knows what the future may hold. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But whatever the future holds, I'm convinced that Representative Crawford is going to be a leader on the House Ag Committee as we move forward. He's got a rodeo background. Now I don't know if we got any rodeo people in here, but if you're willing to ride Broncos and Bulls, you've got my hats off to you. Unfortunately, I had a little accident and had to quit with the rodeo business and went into the announcing and went into public relations and ended up working for John Deere for a while. But he is a friend of agriculture and somebody else that we look forward to working with in Congress in the not too dear future when they get back out of recess, I guess y'all will have recess. But we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a story to tell. We have challenges from inflation to weather to all of the other things that everybody encounters on the farm every day. But as long as we have elected officials who are willing to listen to us and answer our questions and hear our concerns, I believe we are well prepared to open the next chapter and move forward. So at this point, we're going to go to the next phase, and I'm going to ask Congressman Ralph Norman to come forward and share some remarks, and then he will ask the next one and then the next one, and then we're going to sit up here and take questions until it's time for them to catch the airplane. Thank you.
Y'all, thank y'all for coming. I appreciate you driving here. I appreciate the fact that you've come to your meeting. We want to hear from you. There's no question it's off limits. Before I do that, Sheriff Dorsey, you and Joe stand up. One of the finest sheriffs we've had in law enforcement with Joe. He comes to everything in Chester. We've got a problem with the railway. Guess who called me? Sheriff Dorsey. I just want to thank you. Appreciate you doing that. Another one I want to mention, Shag. Stand up, buddy. I don't know how many know Shag. He is a legend in Rock Hill, York County, the whole South Carolina. He cut meat and hair stealer. It's not anybody he did not know. He is he could run for any office. If he announced for Congress, I'd bow out and say, Shag, come on in. Thank you. Let me just, I want to move this along because this is your program, but we've got two great people. You know, when you have, and Harry mentioned relationships, and that is the foundation, but part of that is trust. If you trust somebody, then you can have a relationship. If you can't trust somebody, then you can't. And these two and Harry, you can trust. Rick Crawford, I've known since I got into Congress. He's straight up. Little did we know, he rode bulls. He is a singer and he's got his own band. He's unbelievable. I asked him about a real rough bull that threw everybody off. He said, oh yeah, bodacious. And so he knows everything about it. He's kind of a Renaissance guy. The thing that sets him off, we both sleep in our office. Pelosi, when COVID came, shut the showers down. So I was going through the halls one day and I was upset. I said, you know, well, where am I gonna take a shower? And they said, well, do what Rick Crawford did. I said, what did Rick do? He plumbed his own, he made a shower in his office. He plumbed it himself. He's a Renaissance guy. Mike Conaway, from the 11th District, he served from 2005 2021. And Harry's right. When I voted against the farm bill, there were certain things the work requirement tore me up. Asking people to work 20 hours to me is just along with other things. But when y'all called and when I got to know Mike, I said, it didn't take me long. He's the real deal. He said it straight and it just makes sense. Things that make him unique, he's a CPA. He was chairman of the Ag Committee, which was huge in Congress. He was on the Armed Services Committee and Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which is a huge honor to serve on. Folks, Rick put it as best as I can say it. Farming, food is national security. And I'll never forget Sonny Perdue, who was the leader under Trump of the Ag Farming Committee, and I'll never forget, he was getting peppered by different questions, and he threw up his hands. He said, okay, guys, if you want your food made in China, go forward. If not, let it promote the farmers in your individual state. I will never forget that because it just made sense, and it is a national security issue. Now, there's no question off limits. I'd like for Rick and to come up and just say a few words, anything you want to say. It's an honor for me to have him here. Mike, you follow him up, and then we'll start it.
Thank you, Ralph. I appreciate the invitation. It's always good to be here with my colleagues and meet new friends. Let me just say to start, I love agriculture. Loved it so much, I went to college, got a degree in agriculture. So, kind of like my dad, came from sharecropper stock. And he wanted to be a farmer. A little barrier to entry for a lot of folks. A lot of young farmers don't own their own land. So he said, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get a degree in agriculture, and I'm going to come back and farm. So he needed to go to the military to get his college money. 24 years later, after having served 24 years and earning his degree and earning a master's degree and commission, he retired. Throughout that whole time, he always talked about how great it was to live on the farm. And he would always tell me, when I was your age, I was dragging a pick sack. When I was your age, I was doing this, I was doing that. And so he instilled that ethic in me, that work ethic that kind of made me want to be in agriculture. So when I got out of the military myself, I went to school, got a degree in agriculture, and heck, I ended up being a ranch foreman. I was a rodeo cowboy. I worked in the ag industry in various capacities, but I've never strayed from it. It's been important to me. It still is important to me. I've lived my whole adult life focused on agriculture. And my 17-year-old son told me the other day he was going to get a degree in ag business. And my wife just looked at me and shook her head. I said, I didn't have anything to do with it. He made that decision all on his own. So I think his granddad will be really proud of that decision. But I'm just pleased to be with you, and thank Ralph for the invitation to be here. It's also my great honor to introduce my colleague and friend from Texas, former House Committee on Agriculture Chairman, Mr. Mike Conaway.
Well, Ralph and Carey, thank you all for inviting me here this afternoon. I appreciate that. I made a presentation recently to a group. The title of it was, Why is Rural America and Production Agriculture Important? And I made it to an audience like this. And I told the guys, I said, that's the wrong audience. I need to make that presentation to urban America because the folks in rural America already understand how important rural America is and production agriculture is to all of us. I have a colleague in the Senate who is particularly fond of rooftop gardens. And I don't think you can feed America with rooftop gardens. She would think so, but I don't think that's kind of the way the system works. I could have had my eyes closed from the airport all the way in here. And the fact that you open your meeting with a prayer tells me we're in the South, we're in rural America. Because those values that Rusty Gray praised and bragged on and asked God's blessing on are in safekeeping and are lived every single day by folks in rural America. And that's only possible if we have good farm policy that undergirds and supports production agriculture, that provides the risk management tools and the other attributes of the farm bill that allow you to stand the fight year in and year out, good times and bad times. That policy needs to be in place. And I'm really proud of Ralph. That bill that passed the House and sent with the Senate, the landslide victory was 213 to 211. Every vote was important, and his especially. And so I appreciate him being able to listen, hear what I had to say, and change his position. Because that doesn't happen a lot. The folks who get elected to Congress, they think that the smartest people walking the face of the earth are not really interested in taking input. Ralph is not one of those. He said he listened. I'm pretty confident that he listens to you as well. And so it's really important that you talk to us tonight, talk to him about what's going on and what you see. Because the 23 Farm Bill will be different than the 18, which was different than 14. They're all written against a different backdrop. If you remember, the 14 Farm Bill was written against pretty good times, right? The commodity prices were up and good. And as Senator Stabenow from Michigan said, we really don't need a farm bill because prices are going to go down and things are going to be great in farm America. And words went out of her mouth until commodity prices started dropping, of course, and then some. And then the 18th Farm Bill was written against terrible times. We had a multi-year period where commodity prices were in the tank, and it was a different deal. This Farm Bill will be written against a current circumstances. In 18, we had low commodity prices, but we didn't have staggeringly high input costs. And so the bill that we wrote in 18 was trying to address low commodity prices. The bill in 23, when they could try to address inputs and or margins to try to figure out a different way to take whatever money that's available and structure that against what looks to be the future of production agriculture over the next 5 years. The 23 Farm Bill is in process. There are big challenges ahead, and I'm tickled to death that Ralph's going to be in that fight. Rick is going to be leading that fight off the Ag Committee. And so thank you all for letting me be here tonight. I appreciate that. Look forward to your questions, and I'll make sure that Ralph and Rick answer all the hard ones, and I will answer those. Thank you all for being here.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I have two microphones. We're going to pass them around. Young ladies here, wear your hands up and where do you like?
All right, let's take advantage of this opportunity. I know we got issues going around the farm. So, yes, sir.
That quick. I'm Jeb Wilson. I'm president of South Carolina Association of Conservation Districts. In South Carolina, we're having trouble with Nrcs having enough. We have so many empty jobs in the state, and a lot of the offices that aren't even being manned at this point. We're working through it. We're trying to work with the state office, and we need some help, financial help, or whatever help y'all can give us to get each one of these districts manned so they can do the job to help the farm. We heard from farmers that are not being able to do the things they need to do because of not having personnel in offices. Can y'all do something about that?
So the struggle there, of course, is that every dollar we put in administration means it's a dollar we got to go into programs. So there's the legitimate tension there in that regard. But it's not limited to NRCS. Your colleagues at FAS have the exact same issue. One of the things that I would not have voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, but one of the things it did do is it added $40 billion to USDA's work. It earmarked chunks of that for administration. One of the things we do really well, did really well in Congress, is we give USDA more work to do, but no new money. And so this bill at least gave Secretary Vilsack some additional new dollars to put in place those new programs that are contemplated in the expansion of existing programs that are contemplated in that bill. But it's always a tension between administrative dollars and program dollars because it's the same nut. So I hear you. It's really difficult, but you've got a lot of misery out there with you because I hear the exact same thing from the NRCS and FAS guys in Texas as well. It's not unique to South Carolina, but no real glimmer of hope in the future in terms of more money necessary, except in that the bill that just got passed.
I would say some federal agencies rely on contract labor, and that makes it more difficult when we have furloughs, and that contract labor went away and didn't come back. So from a labor standpoint, that can also be problematic. I don't know if that's the case in what you're describing. In some cases it is. And I don't know how we get folks to come back and return to normal circumstances we had prior to COVID. So COVID may have exacerbated a lot of those problems that Mike described.
Jay, let me just say this, on the Inflation Reduction Act, it was $800 billion, 240 of that was the Green New Deal. Doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's helping states that are unionized, and on the labor market, everybody's struggling. COVID has taken so many people. If you pay them not to work, they're not going to work. And so that's the problem I'm having in the construction industry. And it's what I will give Pelosi credit, like 40 billion she talked about that was added to the Farm Bill. She puts a little grain of good things in, but the majority of it is tearing the country apart and bankrupting the country. So, and I see no difference. We were talking earlier, we're going to try to have the continued resolution until the new Congress takes over. You better hope and pray that Republicans take it over, because the group that's in charge now, as Mike said, are food stamp guys. They have no clue on farming. And so if we can do that, we can debate have a good farm bill as well as many other things.
Well, I'm interested in children in school, and I hope the next farm bill will also include the Gus Schumacher nutrition incentive, because that's important, and the SNAP section, which is also important for nutrition and keeping children well. And I'd like for you all to fight for that.
So one interesting observation about the school nutrition program I think you're referring to is that doesn't come under the purview of the Ag Committee, believe it or not. That comes under Education and Workforce Committee. So that doesn't mean that we wouldn't, as members of Congress, have an interest in it. It just means that as members of the Ag Committee, that's not under our purview. And that's one of the ironies of, we tend to address everything nutrition under the USDA umbrella, and in this case, that's not the case.
Okay, I thought that was part of the farm bill.
No, but we're fighting so many different fronts and streams they're putting on it, particularly with the SNAP program, with the Title IX, gender identity issues. They're talking about not feeding children unless you go with the woke philosophies that this administration is pushing. It's going to be a challenge, to be honest with you, to stomach much of this, because they're tying strings to everything to get their left-wing agenda. And it's really, it's sad that they would use children, feeding children. I think in South Carolina, they're like they're in the millions that qualify for reduced lunch. But I hear you, and we're going to fight. Regardless of the committee, we'll fight, try to fight for it.
My name is Kenny Mullis. I'm also involved with the conservation districts. I'm a national rep to our national organization in Washington. And back to the issue, we do have a problem with funds for hiring people, but there are a lot of other issues going on in South Carolina involving Nrcs that are not tied to funding. We have positions that are already approved and funds are allocated, but they're not being filled. So there's a lot of background going on there that we could use help with getting these positions.
So these are not being filled by the administration, is not filling them, or you just hire them? Okay.
Yes. And that's the problem here in South Carolina.
I think that's emblematic of the administration's view of rural America in general. They don't prioritize that. So we'd have some similar dynamics in Arkansas. So for example, we had presidential appointed positions that haven't been filled in, like state director of FSA, for example, state director of rural development, and state director of Nrcs, as you're talking about. So if that's not a priority for the administration, I mean, what is? Rural America depends on these things. And so, yeah, we need to push back and be a little more aggressive with the administration. Here we are now, a year and a half, and we still don't have these positions filled. That is to the detriment of rural America.
All right, while y'all are thinking about a question, I'm going to let them be answering one. think the odds of having additional money put into the farm bill will be when we start? We briefly touched on reference prices, trying to earmark something to take care of inflation that we have all had to deal with. Do you believe we have an opportunity for new money, or are we looking at less money or status quo?
Well, anything that we do, for example, reference price. I think most people, if you're a cotton farmer in my country, you know, we're big cotton producers, but we also grow a lot of rice. The reference price model is based on 2012 production costs. As Chairman Conaway indicated, 2012 prices were pretty doggone good. 2014, when the Farm Bill was passed, you know, things were looking pretty good. We weren't thinking about reference prices then. Fast forward to now, it doesn't match the economic demands, the cost that you're paying. So, can we address that? Well, I think we have to, but it's a zero-sum game. How much money are we going to have in the Farm Bill? Are they going to give us new money? I don't know, and I'm not sure we should ask for new money. We're $30 trillion in debt, and you know they just came out with having even calculated how much it's going to cost to do student loan forgiveness, upwards of $500 billion. So we continue to see this accumulating debt without any signs of stopping. So I'm not sure that we can't find money elsewhere to address that indexing of our reference prices, but honestly, I'm not sure it's prudent for us to ask for more money in this debt environment. And I'll let Ralph comment on that as well.
Well, I would just add, if we do get new money, there'll be something tied to it that you won't like. Like Rick said, I would make the argument, 30 trillion, I would make the argument we're really 60 trillion when you add the transportation committee, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. So we're heading on a path that's unsustainable. You can't sustain it. So if we get it, I sure wouldn't ask for it, because I know they understand leverage to get what this left wing wants, which is total socialism. I mean, that's the bottom line of it. And it's so frustrating, because they don't value what y'all do. They don't understand it, as Mike put it, you know, great, their food stamp. And so we'll see, but it's going to be a challenge. And the Farm Bill always, it's like the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, they load it up. They know you can't vote against the military. They know you really, mainstream America does not want to vote against farmers. But they load it with all these things that have nothing to do with anything. It's just bankrupting the country. So it's a crapshoot. We'll see how it comes out.
Congress has if you ask me another question, what's the most important constitutional amendment that needs to be added to our Constitution? And I would argue it's a balanced budget amendment. Wes and the Senate and his colleagues over here, they have to make hard choices because they've only got so much money and they can't do an addendum with the other money. And so that forces them to make harder decisions. In Congress in the U.S., you don't have to make those hard decisions. You can always add new money because you simply borrow it from Max and his buddy here and their children. We're borrowing that money from future generations of Americans. We don't have to make hard choices. So if we had a balanced budget limit, then we would have to prioritize and actually choose between the important things and the work that can get done in the farm bill with that new money. There's lots of places where we spend money at the federal level that should not get spent. But because it's easy to do that because you don't have any kind of an enforcement mechanism to force members of Congress to face up to the reality that we can't continue to borrow money the way we have going forward. So I would agree with both of them. New money that's not taken from somewhere else in the budget that's less important. One of the things that I championed in Congress was it was an issue if you want to add a new program to the system, whatever it is, then you had to find a program of equal size or greater to cut and do away with to add your new one. Because if you couldn't do that, what you're saying is the new problem is the least important thing we should do at the federal level. And for goodness sakes, why would you do that? And so having forcing mechanisms would be really important to answer that question broadly. Yes, we should add new money to the farm bill, but it shouldn't come at Max's expense and his children and his grandchildren's expense to make that happen. Because there are lots of other places in the budget where those things are as critical to our nation's long-term health as good production policy, production agriculture policy that could use those resources better. But it will be difficult to make that.
Let me just say this, we were talking earlier about the younger generation taking over the farming operations from each one of you now, how difficult it is. And a whole new front that we're battling is this tax angle. The taxation, the inheritance tax, tax on a stepped up basis, imputed interest. That's a whole new, this administration's on steroids with taxes. And to pass farmland down to family members to do 1031 tax exchanges, folks, they're after it. And there's no tax that they don't like. And that's the other battle that affects every farmer in this room. And it's got all of us real concerned because they mean business and they're moving along.
Let me piggyback on that. Ag Committee, I serve on the Ag Committee. Chairman Conaway chaired the Ag Committee. We don't have any control over tax policy. But let me do a quick informal survey. What if there was an account that farmers had that they could put money into an account every year, tax incentivized account, so that they could take that money out in time of a disaster to help continue to run their operation at no tax penalty? How many would fund that account by show of hands? And we can't do that in the Ag Committee. We can do it in Ways and Means. We got to push Ways and Means. But here, this kind of gets back to how we don't view our tax policy through the lens of agriculture producers, and we should. So, say you have a good year, and those are few and far between for farmers. But let's say you have a good year, and you go into your accountant and says, you probably need to go and buy a new combine, Section 179, right? So that you can reduce your tax liability. Well, then you've messed up your balance sheet, because now you've got this debt on your balance sheet. What if you could take that money and put it into an account? That's how you reduce your tax liability without increasing debt and messing up your balance sheet. That's the kind of thing I think we ought to be thinking about. So can we do it at the federal government, federal level? I don't know. But maybe we can talk to our senators and say, maybe that's something that the states could do, because I guarantee I'm pushing my state senators and state representatives to do this kind of thing at the state level. Because let's not forget that, they know our farmers better than anybody in Washington does, because they live and work along. So why wouldn't we do those kinds of things? If the federal government can't step up and do the kinds of things that we need to incentivize better practices on the farm, then I say we get involved with our state legislators and let them implement some things that best reflect the needs of South Carolina farmers, or Arkansas farmers, or Texas farmers. I mean, those are just some things that we tend to focus on the federal stuff and not think about the role that the state can play to enhance the bottom line for farmers.
I'm Rusty Darby from Chester, cotton farmer from Chester. I'd like to direct this question probably mostly to Congressman Crawford. The best way for me to market my cotton crop is an on-call contract. An on-call contract is where I predetermine a buyer for my cotton. We do not establish a price. He's going to take my cotton and take ownership of it when it comes out of the gin. But I maintain 100% of pricing authority. All price risk lies with me, but the purchaser takes the cotton and can go spend the cotton as far as I'm concerned. I still own the cotton as far as pricing goes. In a depressed market, the loan deficiency payment, which is the stopgap between the cost of production and the world market, when we're losing money below cost of production, that loan deficiency payment is not eligible to me in that contract situation because of a term called beneficial interest. It's not a legislative thing. It doesn't have to be regulated to change that terminology in that contract to make a cotton farmer who's using an on-call contract be eligible for an LDP. But right now, we're not. I'd like to ask you to change that.
Well, so this is kind of what we run into a lot where, And I'm going to say some things that may be a little bit difficult to hear, but Congress has a history of not legislating tightly with intent, but legislating broadly and allowing agencies to interpret, this is what Congress meant. And they do rule promulgation and basically impart some authority on them that might not have been the intent of Congress. And so you have basically bureaucrats telling you this. Their agencies are basically telling you that you're not eligible for that. What the congressional intent was is neither here nor there, because it's now gone to the agency to interpret subjectively the intent of Congress and make rules based on that. So this is what you're suffering from, and it's basically a bureaucratic interpretation of what that authority really was. So can we fix it? Yeah, we can fix it. But now that the rule's been in place for so long, we've got to go back and change the law. That's the difficult challenge that we face. Probably something we can address in the Farm Bill. So what I would like to do is we can coordinate this and figure out what specifically we need to do to identify, to rein that in, so that we're not turning this over to bureaucrats to subjectively interpret what Congress really meant.
Doug Height, Newberry County. With the climate change nuts on the left, we're hearing these issues that cow methane and all this stuff might be taxed down the road per head. Chickens might be taxed on ammonia dispersed from your houses. Have you been hearing about that in your committees, and what can you all do to help us not have to do that?
Raise hell. I mean, I'm on financial services. When I heard methane to cows, when I heard no-till farming, when I heard restrictions on pesticides, on our oversight committee, it's that's how this group is. They mean business on that. The only way that we're going to fix that is for everybody to get their voice back and just have to be outraged about it. There's no tax that they won't put on. That's one thing I've seen. The limits, just like inflation. If you want to get inflation solved, open up the gas lines here in America, produce here in America. But they're just not going to do it. They'd rather buy. They've sold out to China. The bottom line, they have. And the only way we're going to get it back is you change people, you change policies, and you get involved. But it's going to take we the people doing it. Rick, what's your take?
Well, I can tell you this, and in this room we can have this conversation, we can get into the weeds, and we can really talk about technical aspects of things like conservation tillage and stuff like that. They've been around for decades. But this is something new to the environmentalists, or conservation tillage. Wow, it's awesome. Well, you guys have been doing con-till for years in various forms. You know why? Because it made good business sense. And because you're good stewards of your land, it's in your interest to take care of your land because you need to make a crop next year. So you didn't need all this. You're already doing all this. Now they're trying to codify it and then add the sort of carbon sequestration part of it, the tax on methane emissions, ammonia emissions, and stuff like this. It's really kind of ridiculous, and it shows how little they know about production and agriculture. Another thing I want you to get familiar with. Washington is full of environmental activists. But this room is full of active environmentalists. You get me? Because y'all been doing it this way for years because it's been in your interest to do it. How do we overcome this? We start telling this story. We have got to start telling this story outside of this echo chamber. That means maybe we go into schools and start talking about it. Look, we got our FFA kids here. They can tell that story too. But we were having this conversation earlier. One of the things that scares the American people more than anything is you walk in the grocery store and see the back of the shelf. We need to start telling the story proactively about what these policies are going to do to your access to food. And when we tell that story, we win people over. They start to understand this is not good policy for us because it's all kind of cloaked in this ag policy stuff, and we're trying to protect the environment. But we're really talking about food policy and national security. Because I've been to countries that, I was in Havana here a while back. I said, take me to the best grocery store in town. I would take my dog to that grocery store. And what they had on the shelf, you would not feed to your dog. And that was the best grocery store in town. We don't ever want to get to that position. We're a long way from that ever happening here in the United States. My point is, you've probably been to the grocery store recently and seen the back of the shelf. And that is alarming because it doesn't usually happen. And it's policies like this that will lead to that kind of thing. And we just need to be more proactive in telling that story, because when we do, we win.
It's that simple too. You know, during the Obama administration, I saw the farmers that came up. Obama was trying to put a regulation in that made you put silk fence on logging roads. Now, and they think about that, silk fences on logging roads, which made no sense in permits. I thought that was bad, but now the flatulence on cows and all this other thing, and it's shocking, but they're serious about it. And I knew, and Rick's exactly right. We've got to go out as a group and say, do you want your food made here? Do you even want food? And I got a call 3 weeks ago from my cousin who was panicked. They own House Array for chickens. He said, I can't get corn from my poults. The other thing is fertilizer. Y'all know what fertilizer's done. Harry was saying it's double, and then other people said even more than that. That's what we've got to shout from the rooftops, because we're there. And he's right. Empty shelves gets everybody's attention.
I'm Maria Lund with First Son EAP, and I work with the South Carolina Agri-Wellness Program, which is free mental health counseling for all farmers in South Carolina and their family members. And I wanted to ask you all about your thoughts related to supporting farm stress relief, maintaining and continuing it.
I'll take that one, and the reason I'll take that is because my wife is a mental health counselor, so that's why I'm so well adjusted, right? I need professional help, so here's the thing. If our churches are not engaged in this ministry, particularly churches in rural communities, that's a missed opportunity to minister to people who need it. I know farm bureaus across the country are engaging in outreach, suicide prevention. This is a stressful time for farmers. So whether that is Farm Bureau based, whether it is church based, whatever, we need to, as communities, reach out to our farmers and let them know that there are resources available for them. Because, and I think this is particularly true for men. Men are scared to ask for help. It's just part of being a man, I guess. And maybe that's not the politically correct thing to say, but that's just typically how men are. They don't necessarily like to ask for help, and particularly on issues like this. But this is something that I think our church-based outreach can really do so many great things for the community, and this is one of them. And so, for folks that, if you want to get involved in that, I go to church, my pastor is a farmer, and he's been very engaged in this, and I can share contact with you on how they set that up. It's a very active ministry for them because we have so many farmers, in my state, in my district, and so it's been something that's been much needed, and it's been a void that's been addressed.
Tom Wilson, Chester County. I'm concerned, I'm a weekend. I'm about as long as the world.
They're closer. They're closer to you now. I'm concerned because I don't ever see any incentives in any of the programs for young beekeepers. It's almost to the point where there are no old beekeepers. All the old beekeepers and no young beekeepers. And as you know, about 2/3 of the world's crops are pollinated by honeybees, not counting what the other pollinators do. So I'm kind of concerned that there's not ever any emphasis put on any programs for pollination or encouraging young people to take up this segment of agriculture. And don't ever let them put tax on my stock, please, because they have to come count. So, and honeybees are concerned
considered as a agricultural product, a livestock product. I know a lot of other beekeepers are concerned about that too, because it's pretty soon it's going to die.
I'll say this, what I know about beekeeping, basically I just told you everything I know. But because I don't know anything about beekeeping, I joined the Pollinators Caucus. Did you know that in Congress there's a Pollinators Caucus? And it exists to address exactly what you're talking about. Is the policies that are, designed to help, maybe not just incentivize, but also prevent damage to beekeepers and how important pollination is in ag country. So we have a lot of cotton grown in my district, and you can see all the hives on the turn rows and stuff like this. It's really, really important stuff. I actually put on a beekeeping suit one time in a 90-degree temperature, and didn't like it much, so God bless you for doing it. But it's really, really important. And there's probably as much pressure on beekeepers. The biggest beekeeping outfit in my district left the state of Arkansas and moved because of bad policy. That was, unfortunately, it was state policy. Moved to Mississippi. They adopted the same policy, and he moved from Mississippi. And I'm talking about this guy sends truckloads of bees to California every year to pollinate the almond crop there. So he moved to North Dakota. You can't keep moving operations around looking for the best place to operate, and that's not a sustainable model. So I get it completely. A lot of the stuff that's complicating your life as a beekeeper are policies that are addressed in committees that might not be the Ag Committee, but things like the EPA certainly puts a lot of pressure on you, and some of the rules and interpretation of rules and so on that they deal with. So some of the chemicals that are in the air, things like that. Yeah, we've got to find a balance to be able to make sure that we're not being punitive to beekeepers.
Well, there's been a lot done as far as pesticides and so forth, and Clemson's doing a good job in our state. They're doing a good job with regulations and enforcing regulations. But we still need more money for Clemson as far as like a bee lab. Right now, if we have a problem in our bee labs, we have to send them to a bee lab in Texas or Maryland. And Clemson would have a bee lab where they could not make this diagnosis, and we'd have an answer to our bee problems just overnight almost instead of 3 or 4 weeks.
Here's what I'd say too, we need to be educated. I don't know anything about bees, but you're in the business.
You know, one day, I'll educate you.
Go put a beekeeping suit on for starters.
But we need education. I read an article when you were in the newspaper, I think that was you, a good while back. We need to be educated. Our young people need to be educated on what it does, what it means, and what it means to our environment and to our crops. So help get the education out. Tell us what we can do as legislators and what we can put up to bring awareness. That's where it starts. That's the first step in a long stairway.
The kids in kindergarten and first grade, second grade know more about bees than most adults do. Because they see it on YouTube.
Good evening. My name is Sheila Walker, and I'm a Great Falls native. And I just have a question to ask as in reference to the solution. What is, I heard you all stating that there's a depth issue. And I just want to know, what is the solution from all Americans in Chester County? How to get rid of this debt?
How you get rid of what?
How can we get rid of this debt? Debt.
Oh, debt?
Yes, debt.
Stop spending money. Start having offsets. Not like you do in your business, I do in mine. You can't keep spending. That's what's so frustrating. In Congress, and Rick and Mike both know it's easy to say yes. We're at the end of the runway of saying no. Each one of you in your respective, and everybody here is knows the farming world, knows things that can be cut or sunsetted. That's what we need to hear. But it's not easy, and it's going to have to be. We're reckoning with it now. As Rick said, we're 30 trillion and a lot more. But you look at, nobody's seen the type of spending that we've seen in the last 19 months. I haven't. And so there'll be a reckoning day on it. But answer your question, Sheila, you stop spending, you start cutting, and you make the case for it to the American people, and the American people will understand it.
So every year, the House is supposed to adopt a budget, and the President's supposed to propose a budget. It rarely happens on time or when it's supposed to, but every time the Republican Study Committee proposes a budget that actually gets to a balanced budget between 6 and 10 years out. And the policies that are embedded in that budget are stunningly difficult to adopt, but it's a roadmap. And it would be a good way to say, this is how hard it's going to be to make that happen. Because every single dollar that goes out of the federal treasury goes into somebody's bank account, somebody's deposit slip. And if you start talking about taking that away from them, obviously they're not going to be real happy about this. So reining in the spending and doing everything else is going to be really hard. But the Republican Study Committee does prepare every year a balanced budget that gets to a balanced budget within 6 or 10, 6 to 10 years, in that kind of a window. But it just shows you how hard it's going to be to make that happen. It is righteous, it's the right thing to do is to get there. But so far, the 16 years I was there, as these folks have been there, we haven't done it yet. And that's a detriment to future Americans, future generations of Americans. We're going to have to continue to pay the interest on that debt for their lifetimes. So it's important.
I've had almost 12 years I've been in Congress, I've had the opportunity to vote on a balanced budget amendment one time. And I made an argument about this to leadership at one point. I said, they were whipping a budget, I said, I'm not voting. I made up my mind I'm not going to vote to support any budgets. And leadership came by and said, how come you're voting against the budget? I said, because we haven't done a balanced budget amendment. They said, well, we can't pass a balanced budget amendment. Maybe not. But we should start, before we ever ask for a member to vote on a balanced budget, we ought to at least make the effort to put in some sort of fundamental underpinning. Then the argument I got back was, well, if we do a balanced budget amendment, that could create a need to raise revenues to achieve balance. Okay, let's do it this way. How about we do a spending limitation amendment, where we cap spending as a percentage of the economy? So historically, we've functioned at what, 18, 19% of GDP is our budget number. I think we're at 25, 26% now. So I propose that we cap spending at 19%, but we give ourselves a 5-year, I'd even go with a 10-year glide path to get down to that, back to that 19% as the fundamental underpinning of how much money we spend. Because it's your money, it's a finite resource, but they don't see it that way. And here we are now, $30+ trillion in debt with some unfunded liabilities we can't calculate at all. But on paper, I guess it's showing $31 trillion roughly, and still haven't made any progress on that. And look, to me, that fundamentally defines the size, scale, and scope of the federal government if you put that spending limitation amendment in place. Now, you could even put a 2/3 majority vote to say in time of war, for example, or an emergency, to bust the caps. But still, I mean, as a year-to-year function, I think we've got to fundamentally change the way we're spending your money.
So we came with one vote of having a balanced budget amendment out of the House and the Senate. In the late 90s, during the dot-com boom, we were running actual budget surpluses. John Casey from Ohio likes to brag about, I think, 4 years of budget surpluses. 2 of those years included Social Security excesses that aren't really a part of the deal, but 2 years here we had general revenue exceeded general expenditures. We had an excess. There would have never been an easier time to adopt a balanced budget amendment than when the budget's balanced. And so the vote comes out of the House with the requisite 2/3. It failed in the Senate because of one vote. The record shows 65-35. The Republican leader of the Senate voted against it so he could bring it back up at some point in time, but it would have lacked one Republican vote in the Senate. And that fellow who's no longer with us asked his rationale. His rationale was that a high school economics teacher had told him that a balanced budget amendment was wrong, was bad for the country. and so he voted no. And he voted yes. The amendment would go to the states. Pretty confident the states would have adopted it pretty darn quickly. And I don't know what our tax rates would look like today, but we wouldn't be $31 trillion in debt. You know, we've had the luxury in 16 years I was there, I could vote for spending without having to raise taxes because we just pushed it off on future generations. Both sides, Republicans and Democrats are equally at fault in this regard because I could vote to spend money and I didn't vote to raise my taxes. And so, like Rick, I would have voted for any balanced budget and everything we put up, but we don't get that opportunity very often. But historically, we came within one vote in the Senate of getting that done.
I think the other thing we as politicians are going to have to do is lay the priorities out, which are military security, is national security, is economic security, and law enforcement. What Sheriff and Joe and his group do, if we're not safe at where we shop, everything else is void. But we got to be safe. China will scare you to death. If you could follow any of us in Congress, it will scare you to death what's taking place. None of this takes into account the 15 million illegals that's going to come to South Carolina, many of which they're going to go to our schools or hospitals. I pity law enforcement having to, what they've got to do with what we're facing with this. All this spending doesn't even account for that. And it's going to be close to anywhere from 12 to 15 million. That's 5 football stadiums of Clemson every 30 days coming into this country. It's going to tax our 140-some welfare state that we've got, programs that's in the country. So it's having priorities. We've got to sell that to American people.
My name is Melanie Scholl. I'm a farmer and I own a environmental engineering and technical services business, and I help farmers every day. I work with farmers, and I'm also a commissioner for a soil and water conservation district. So I have a couple quick things. Number one, I just want to ask y'all, as conservative politicians, be a voice for conservative politicians in conservation. I feel like conservation in a lot of conversations with politics has been equated with Great New Deal and with things like that. And that's not what it is. I think conservation is preserving our natural resources, taking taxpayer money, putting it back into private citizens' pockets so that they can do things to preserve natural resources on their own land. And I feel like it's a missed opportunity for conservatives not to be saying that loud and clear. That is, it aligns with every conservative value.
Joe, hit that. You want to know if we could be a voice for conservatism and conservation practices more. I agree with you.
And next thing is just, as someone who works with farmers every day, farmers rely on assistance from agencies like Nrcs, technical assistance, and also assistance with implementing practices on their farm. Being involved with the conservation districts are critical in making sure that those programs are administered. But none of that is going to function like it's supposed to if it's not locally led. So the other thing that I would like to say is I hope there's emphasis on locally led. We are not going to address all the resource concerns. We are not going to be able to understand everything that's going on in our communities if we don't have the community's voices leading where the money is going. So locally led is a principle that's in the 2018 Farm Bill. I hope that it stays in this Farm Bill. And last thing, I've been a part of a few local work groups where we've got together and we've asked people in the community, what do you want to see? You know, what are priorities for you? And one of these groups said, hey, let's talk about the new Farm Bill. Let's talk about what priorities we would like to see in the new Farm Bill. And one of the things was education. So y'all talked about this a good bit, but we need to be telling our story. I'm from the city, now I'm a farmer, and that's what's made me passionate about talking about farming is because I know how much I didn't understand, and I know how much people don't understand, and we've got to figure out a way to get the message out. So education is another big thing.
Let me say this about that. You mentioned the NRCS, and I would agree with you that the NRCS has historically been a great resource, a technical resource for farmers engaging in, say, for example, a tailwater recovery system on their farm, or surface water retention projects, and so on. So you have really kind of 3 agencies that are kind of pivotal to this. One being the NRCS, and from a technical standpoint, designing it, helping it. Then you've got to get the Corps involved in some cases. Then you got the EPA in the mix. Well, guess what? Waters of the U.S. turned NRCS on its ear and turned it into a regulatory agency. It's no longer a consulting resource. That's what WOTUS would have done. Okay, so they gave them, and they gave the Corps the kind of authority that makes it difficult for people to engage in projects on their farm. That's counterintuitive to everything you're trying to get people to engage in conservation programs, like a tailwater recovery as an example, which is a fairly common thing in my neck of the woods. And WOTUS upended all that. And it really kind of changed the relationship that the NRCS had historically had with farmers, which one of being very friendly to one of being adversarial. And that's not the way it was. You mentioned local governance. I think that's really important to maintain the continuity of the NRCS and what the true spirit of what the NRCS is supposed to be. And I see that transition, if WOTUS is fully implemented, becoming a real problem and really an impediment to exactly what we're supposed to be doing. So.
All right, we've got time for one more question. I hate to bring this to a close, but I know we've got airplanes to catch to the young lady in the back, and then we're going to wrap up.
My name is Ashley Mills. I have beef cattle here in Fairfield County. I'm a third generation, and I'm raising the fourth. And I really hope that beef cattle will still be a viable, thriving living for my children. We've mentioned how important it is to support agriculture in the United States. And Mr. Norman, I would strongly encourage you to support things like the Cool Bill, which was the country of origin labeling, which has not gotten any traction. In my opinion, it doesn't make sense, but the money backs outside beef coming into the United States and not being labeled as outside beef. But that undercuts the market for my product nationally. There's a lot going on right now in the beef industry. I'm pretty sure most everybody's heard something about the Price Transparency Act that's in Congress right now. But stepping up and supporting our small farmers and our large farmers to be able to continue to have viable products here in the United States so that they're not undercut by foreign food coming in is very important. And I would really hope that we can get moving forward with some of these things that would at least let the consumer know what the product they're buying comes from.
It's a health issue to know where your food's coming from. If it's from another country or where it's coming from, we owe it to enforce that and to advocate for that, which I agree 100% with what you're saying.
All right. I think we've had a wonderful question and answer. As the Congressman can tell, we have a lot of interest and a lot of questions and a lot of concerns. But let's give them all a real good South Carolina. I'm going to now call on Adrian Wilkes, Fairfield County Farm Bureau President, for his closing remarks.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming out here. Just look around the room, I see large producers, full-time producers, down to small part-time producers such as myself. See students in the back over there, educators, local elected officials, state elected officials, and our congressman. I thank all of y'all for coming out to be a voice for agriculture. You know, as President alluded to earlier, less than 2% of people in this country feed the rest of the country. And it's important that those 2% of people get our story out. A couple years ago, the Young Farmers and Ranchers met in Charleston. Our whole theme for the weekend was Tell Your Farm Story. And I encourage each of you, as you leave out of here tonight, go out and tell your farm story. And to our elected officials, I encourage you to give us an opportunity to tell our farm stories to y'all. Give us the opportunity to come to the House floor, tell our farm story, come to the Senate chambers, tell our story. Farm Bureau implemented a great program this year in South Carolina, Farmer of the Week program, that allowed farmers from across the state to have an opportunity to meet with the elected officials from their areas. I would encourage y'all to take advantage of that opportunity, listen to the farmers and come to support. I know we've got some people with some flights to catch, so I'll wrap up my comments. But again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and hope y'all drive safe getting home.